Okay. Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning, Doug. Your camera's working.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much.
Can we go on the record? Are we waiting for anybody else? Will Ms. Moore be joining us, or?
Ms. Moore will not be joining us. It's just
Okay.
Ms. Harakis and me today.
Okay, thank you. And if we're on the record, good morning, everybody. Calling the case in the matter of the application of Columbia Gas of Maryland, Inc. for authority to increase rates and charges. We are before the Maryland Public Service Commission. It is case number 9664. My name is Christine Burke. I'm the Public Utility Law Judge assigned to hear this case. If I could have appearances of counsel, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, and good morning to everyone. Carville Collins on behalf of Columbia Gas of Maryland.
Good morning, Your Honor. Amy Harakis on behalf of Columbia Gas of Maryland.
Morning. And for OPC? And actually,
Your Honor, Joe Cleaver on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel.
good morning. And I do not see
Just
anyone.
a little bit. You're low on that, my end.
Did you get that, Doug?
I was having trouble picking up Joe Cleaver.
Hey, Doug, is that better?
Not really. Can you get closer to the mic?
Not that.
I'll deal with it, but it's still very low. Thank you.
Your Honor, I'm not sure what it would be. I could get out and get back in to see if that'll help matters.
I'll deal with it, Joe. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it on this end.
Okay, I can hear.
Thanks, Doug. I'll try to speak up.
Thank you. And also is for OPC?
Sorry, Daria Pugh on behalf of OPC.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And for commission staff? I think you're muted.
You're muted.
Good morning, Your Honor. Annette Garofalo and Kenneth Albert on behalf of Commission staff.
Good morning. And we're here today for evidentiary hearing in the continuing matter of Columbia Gas. Today we were to address updated rate case expenses. Are there any other preliminary matters that we need to deal with? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Your Honor, if I may, just two preliminary matters. First, hopefully everyone did receive our filing and Excel work papers sent last evening. They were uploaded to the box at around 4:36 p.m. and courtesy copies were then sent a little bit later in the evening at 8:57 to all parties and to Your Honor. Secondly, we did file on Friday responses to the bench data requests, and hopefully everyone had seen those. And at this time, if it's appropriate, I would ask that they be marked as Columbia Hearing Exhibit. I believe we're up to number 17, if my records are correct. Columbia Hearing Exhibit 17.
Yes, that's correct. And so that would be the bench data request. I believe it was 1 through 4.
Yes, Your Honor, 4 questions and our 4 responses.
Those will be marked for identification. Is there any objection to admitting those to the record?
No objection, Your Honor.
And I believe there's no objection from OPC. Mr. Cleaver, I didn't hear you, but
Objection.
okay, thank you. Those will be admitted as Columbia Exhibit 17 to the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, we would like to suggest that that Mr. Racher is available to address any questions or provide any information in connection with the filing made yesterday of the updated rate case expenses incurred through evidentiary hearings. So if Your Honor would like, we are happy to put him back on the stand and have him essentially walk us through that filing and be available for any questions that the parties or Your Honor may have.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Racher.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Racher, let me just ask you if you have a copy of the filing made yesterday, September 20th, 2021, entitled Updated Rate Case Expenses Incurred Through Evidentiary Hearings, together with 2 attachments. The first is Exhibits 1, 3, 6, 8, and 9, which have been updated. And the second attachment would be the company's response to staff DR 3-21. This also is updated in the form of the 4th supplemental and accompanying attachments. Do you have that before you?
Yes, I do.
And were these schedules prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes, they were.
And are they accurate and true and accurate to the best of your information, knowledge, and belief?
Yes, they are.
Are there any updates or changes since yesterday's filing?
No.
Great. Your Honor, I would ask that the yesterday's filing of September 20th, 2021, together with the 2 attachments, updated exhibits 1, 3, 6, 8, and 9, and secondly, the response to staff data request 3-21, the 4th supplemental, and the accompanying attachments be marked as Columbia Hearing Exhibit 18.
So marked.
And if there are no objections, I would ask that Columbia Hearing Exhibit 18 be moved into the record.
Is there any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Cleaver, I didn't hear you, but I think you said no objection.
No objection. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I must be having a sound issue. I'm not sure what's happening. But yeah, no objection for now.
Okay.
Let me try to figure this out. Thank you.
Thank you. The updated exhibits 1, 3, 6, 8, as well as the staff data request response 3-21 4th supplement, which was 172 pages, will be admitted as Columbia's Exhibit 18 into the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Racher is available for any questions that the parties or Your Honor may have.
OPC?
And let me also offer, if the parties would prefer, Mr. Racher would also be available to just briefly walk us through the filing and the schedules, if that would be helpful to just the orderly procession of today's hearing.
Yeah, that would be. Thank you.
All right. Well, then let me ask Mr. Racher to just walk us through. And Mr. Racher, if you wouldn't mind, if you go from exhibit to exhibit, just give us a moment so we can follow along with our programs. I think we'll probably all just be doing it by the filing and the emails that were sent around yesterday. So if you would just walk us through it, that would be appreciated.
Certainly. Right. I would start with the actual rate case expenses through September 17th that were provided in response to staff Set 321 fourth supplemental that was filed yesterday. And you could refer to attachment F, which is, I believe, page 54 of the PDF. And that shows monthly expenses broken out by the various categories. And you will see there's an update in the September 2021 column. And the total expenses for this rate case through the hearing through September 17th are $154,689. And following attachment F, there are copies of invoices that support the costs that are shown here. And I won't walk through all those because there's a number of them unless there are any questions. And so this is an increase of $33,100 over the previous updated amount that was through August 31st, 2021. And so that is the rate case expense through September 17th, which encompasses expenses incurred for the hearing. So if we would like to switch now from there to the exhibits that were filed yesterday, and they've been headed with a header noting Exhibit 1, for instance, supplemental revised 9.20.2021 to differentiate them. So Exhibit 3, sheet 14, shows the updated amount that was shared in the updated data request response. And it's as highlighted in yellow on that sheet. Moving forward, the Exhibit 1 supplemental revised 9/20/2021 sheet 1 shows the updated revenue requirement. This is now $5,464,395. So the other exhibits, I've mentioned Exhibit 3, which shows the O&M expense for rate case expense. Exhibit 1 shows the revenue requirement as noted. There are, in this model, it's dynamic, and Exhibit 5 calculates the other taxes. Exhibit 6 calculates the income taxes associated. And then Exhibit 9, and if I'm going too fast, I can slow down. Exhibit 9 shows a cash working capital impact of a change in expense, which then would carry through to Exhibit 8, which is rate base. So the end result of the change in expense running through the various exhibits and calculations yields the revenue requirement change as noted on Exhibit 1.
And just to review, Mr. Racher, the total expense change, what is that number? And the total revenue requirement change, what is that number?
The total expense change for the rate case expense is $33,100. The total revenue requirement change in Exhibit 1 supplemental revised September 20, 2021 sheet 1 is $5,464,395, which is an increase of $34,168 from the $5,430,227 that was a part of our last update, which I believe was dated September 10th, 2021.
So just for clarification, then the expense change of 33,100 has produced a change in the revenue requirement of just a little bit more than that, 34,168. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, I would just suggest that Mr. Racher is available for any questions that the parties or Your Honor has.
Thank you. OPC, do you have any questions for Mr. Racher?
I do have a couple questions. Your Honor, is it still difficult to hear me?
You're okay right now. I can hear you.
Okay, Mr. Racher, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Racher, if I could ask you to turn to on the PDF document that was provided yesterday, which it looks like it's a 172-page document. Could you turn to page 97 of the PDF, which is one of Vincent Ray's invoices from Regulatory Finance Associates, LLC. And specifically at page 97 of the PDF, you'll see the invoice for the period covering July 6th, 2021 to August 31st, 2021. Let me know when you're there.
Did you say July 6th?
July 26th.
Okay, yes, I'm there.
I see here that Mr. Ray, it looks like he identifies the tasks that he performed, and he lists each one separately with a bullet point next to it. Do you see that?
I do.
And it looks like for this period, he spent a total of 89.23 hours. Do you see that?
I do.
And then he bills for those 89.233 hours at $260 an hour for a total of $23,200.58 for this period. Is that right?
I see that.
Right. The very last bullet point that says allocation of time spent for LMS training requirements. I'd like to ask you about that. What is LMS training?
I believe LMS stands for Learning Management System.
Whose system is that?
That system is a NiSource system.
Is that a new system?
It's been around a while.
Was it around when Columbia litigated its last rate case in 2020, case 9644?
I believe it was.
Okay. Do you know what portion of that $23,200.58 is attributable to Mr. Ray's time spent for LMS training requirements?
I do not.
The word allocation there, could you explain the allocation process that's referred to there and what that means?
This is Mr. Ray's invoice. I don't know what he exactly meant by that word.
Does anybody at Columbia review these entries to make sure that they understand them before they pay Mr. Ray?
They do.
Who is that?
I believe that is a person named Adam Gale.
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Gale.
what's that name again, please? I didn't look it up.
Sure, it's Adam, A-D-A-M, Gale, G-A-L-E. There may be others as well.
In sponsoring these invoices, do you rely upon the review of those individuals, Adam Gale and possibly others that review these invoices?
I do.
Do you recall any conversation with Mr. Gale about what that entry may mean?
I do not.
Could you go down to page 99 of the invoice or of the PDF, which is Mr. Ray's immediately preceding invoice to the one we just talked about? And it's the invoice for the period covering June 1, 2021 to July 25th, 2021. Do you see that?
I do.
And there's also the last bullet there. There's also an entry for allocation of time spent for LMS training requirements. Do you see that?
I do.
Is it fair to say that you don't know what portion of the $10,868 invoice is attributable to that?
I do not.
Could you go down to page 101 of the PDF?
And the dates are February 15th through March 31st.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
And again, you can see that there's an entry there, the last bullet point for the same, with the same description as what we've talked about previously. Allocation of time spent for LMS training requirements, right?
I do.
And is it also fair to say that for the $25,584 figure representing the total amount billed under this invoice, that you don't know what percentage of that is attributable to that training?
That's correct.
Okay, and finally, I think this is the last one. I'm now on page 103 of the PDF. This is the invoice for April 1, 2021 to May 31, 2021. And again, there's an identical time entry as the last bullet point there. Do you see that?
I do.
And finally, for the record, is it correct that you don't know what portion of that $13,646.10 figure representing the total amount of the invoice is attributable to that training?
I do not.
Thank you, Mr. Racher. Your Honor, could I have your indulgence for a moment? Mr. Racher, are you able to provide any more detail beyond what you've already provided about what the LMS training system is?
It is a system that is used to assign training to individuals that may be related to safety, may be related to procedures, may be related to policy changes, and those the system sends reminders. It is something that it records participation or completion of the training that's assigned, and so it's a system used for that purpose. And I know it's used by employees. Mr. Ray is a contractor. There may be an assignment for contractors of training. Again, I'm not as familiar with all the details of who and how training gets assigned.
Do you have any personal knowledge of NiSource training that's assigned to other outside experts and what that training may entail?
I don't have that personal knowledge.
When Mr. Ray was working on this case for Columbia Gas of Maryland, was he at the same time performing any other services in connection with any other case for NiSource?
Subject to check, I believe so.
Subject to check, again, do you know what those services were? Can you describe them?
Cost of capital, rate of return, consulting services for one of the other NiSource utilities or more.
Do you have any personal knowledge of any situations where an outside consultant is performing work for multiple NiSource distribution utilities at the same time, and the cost of that work are allocated among the distribution utilities?
Sorry, could you rephrase that or restate that question? I'm not sure I follow.
Sure. Do you have any familiarity with any previous situation where an outside consultant was performing work for multiple NiSource distribution utilities at the same time, and the fees of that outside consultant were allocated among the distribution utilities for whom the consultant was performing work?
Your Honor, I'm going to step in here and object at this point. These are questions from OPC that relate to invoices that have been a part of the record for some number of weeks or months. We had Mr. Ray on the stand last week and available for questions of this type. the questions that are now coming to Mr. Racher, who is an accounting witness, is I think it's pretty far afield from his area of expertise as to what Mr. Ray is doing in this case and in other cases, and what sort of allocation this is. I think there was ample opportunity for these questions for some number of months. This information was provided fairly early on and then has been updated as additional invoices have come along. So these are not questions anymore about yesterday's filing. These are questions that relate to prior periods that have been a part of the record for some number of weeks or months now.
I'm going to overrule the objection. Mr. Cleaver, as much as Mr. Racher knows, and it's maybe beyond the scope of his knowledge, but if you can answer, Mr. Racher, please go ahead.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Your Honor, but
It was a long question. Maybe you can break it down, Mr. Cleaver.
And there was a bit of a gap between the question and the objection, so.
Let me try it again. Mr. Racher, in your experience working for NiSource companies, have you ever encountered a situation where an outside consultant was performing work for multiple NiSource distribution utilities at the same time?
Yes, and I understand your question to mean that they're performing on a project or consulting on a project that may benefit multiple NiSource companies. So it's an overarching company-to-company project. That could be what you're asking, or are you asking, is this person providing specific project consulting for a NiSource utility?
Yeah, I was trying to break the question down, so let's just stick for now with, are you aware of any situation with a consultant performing work for multiple NiSource distribution utilities at the same time?
Yes.
Thank you. And in those scenarios, did any of them involve the expert or the outside consultant allocating his or her time spent on any activity among different NiSource distribution utilities?
I don't have knowledge of the specifics around that you're referring to.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Racher. Your Honor, I think that's all the questions I have on this. Thank you. And those are all my questions for Mr. Racher today. Thank you, Mr. Racher.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Garofalo, do you have questions for Mr. Racher?
I just have a few, I hope they're clarifying questions. Mr. Racher, this is your final accounting exhibit, is that correct, in this case?
Correct.
And does it replace any other exhibit?
This would replace the schedules, the exhibits filed on, I believe it was September 10th. As I've noted in my testimony this morning, these revised exhibits dated September 20th, 2021 would replace the like exhibits that have been filed in the past.
And to the extent they include anything in Columbia's case, these represent Columbia's final position. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were items other than rate case expenses adjusted in these schedules?
There were no other, well, I did mention the rate case expense change has a follow-on with taxes and cash working capital and things like that. So all those related amounts, as I walked through previously this morning, would have changed due to the fact rate case expense was updated.
So for those of us in the audience who aren't accountants, I wonder if you could just list the items that were changed as a result of a change in rate case expenses.
Okay. At a high level, say that gross receipts tax, uncollectibles, PSC, OPC fees, income taxes, cash working capital. And so that would be a high level view of what changes dynamically with a change in expenses.
And can you explain why uncollectibles would be changed as a result of a change in rate case expenses?
To the extent we are recovering additional rate case expenses and there's experience, as has been noted in this case, that there's a percentage of our revenue that's billed that is uncollectible. And so there's a provision for that, and that adjusts with any changes in the revenue requirement.
So ordinarily, if an expense that wasn't rate case expenses increased, would we expect rate case expenses to increase or to decrease?
Could you please repeat that?
Sure. If you have a set number for rate case expenses and another expense, in this case, it's rate case expenses, increases, would you expect, what sort of change would you expect in rate case expenses, an increase or a decrease?
If you're referring to rate case expenses in your question by the expenses that are shown on sheet 14, other expenses don't impact what I've reflected as rate case expense in sheet 14.
So I'm just trying to be clear about what has changed as a result of an increase in rate case expenses. You told me that one of the things that had changed was uncollectibles.
Right.
I think is an amount, right? It's an amount that wasn't collected during the test year. And I'm just wondering how an increase in rate case expenses in this case would cause an increase in uncollectible expense.
Yeah, as I noted, in our schedules, and I could point you to that in Exhibit 1, where the revenue requirement is calculated, there is there are updates for certain expenses that are impacted by changes in revenue. So uncollectible expenses is impacted by that. I believe it's a less than 1% impact, as noted.
Could you expand on that? I'm sorry, I still don't understand.
Sure. I think that when we look to change an expense and recover that change in our revenue requirement, that revenue requirement has to cover the fact that uncollectible accounts experience will also follow that change in the revenue requirement, meaning if we bill an amount, there's a certain expense or a certain amount of that revenue that is uncollectible from customers, and that's based on an experience factor that we have included in this case from the outset. And so to the extent there's a change in that revenue requirement, there is a change in uncollectible amounts around that. So it's like.
So are you saying that the amount of uncollectibles in this case is not an actual number, but it's a percentage of revenue collected?
Let me it is an amount, it's a actual experience, and there's a percentage amount calculated from that actual experience that's then applied to the change in the revenue requirement that we're seeking in this case. And so it's as we know, these rates go into effect in the future. And so as part of that, there's an expectation that an amount of that increase will be uncollectible as it has been in the past.
So just to be clear, so this case though is based on 13-year average of actual expenses, correct?
I'm sorry, no. A 13-year average of actual expenses?
Sorry, 13-month average of actual expenses.
Ms. Garofalo, I know that the 13-month average you're speaking of, I believe, is related to the rate base in this case. The expenses are the test year amount adjusted for the test year May 31st, 2021.
So the numbers for expenses that are in this case, are those actual numbers or are those projected numbers?
They're actual numbers that are in some instances adjusted for either a 5-year average to normalize them, or they're annualized, or they're expected to where they're expected to be on a normal basis for the test year to be reflected in rates.
And was that issue addressed by the witnesses who introduced these expenses?
Yeah, I believe in a sense, each in our filing, Exhibit 3, Sheet 2 specifically, shows adjustments to operation and maintenance expenses in a summarized fashion for the 12 months ended May 31st, 2021. And I sponsored that particular exhibit. And there is a list of expense items and the adjustments to them. And the following sheets describe those adjustments.
And is rate case expenses included on Exhibit 3, Sheet 2?
In a summarized fashion, yes.
So if I were to go to that exhibit, I would be able to tell which items had been, were not actuals, but were something else.
you would see a column labeled per books amount and a column labeled adjustments that sum to a column labeled pro forma test year O&M. And then there's a reference column to determine more about those.
Okay, so now of the things that changed as a result of this, your final exhibit, is there anything else that's on Exhibit 3, Sheet 2? Other than rate case expenses, which we've been talking about.
See, I don't. I would have to take some time and look at this. I don't think so, but
You're looking like you're thinking it, so I don't want to interrupt your setup.
no, I was just, as I looked down this list, I was just looking to see if, trying to answer your question. And I would say no. The rate case expense is what has changed on that sheet, as is detailed, as I mentioned previously, on sheet 14.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wright. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Garofalo. I do not have any questions for Mr. Racher. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Racher.
You're welcome, Your Honor.
Mr. Collins, is there anything else from the company?
No, Your Honor, thank you. So far as we know, that fully concludes our case, including updates through last week on expenses. I'd like to express my thanks and appreciation to Your Honor and to the parties for your patience working with us through this proceeding.
Thank you. Is there anything else from OPC?
Your Honor, this is a little bit of an unusual request, but of course, this proceeding right now that we've just been sitting in for the past hour almost, was identified as an evidentiary proceeding. The purpose was to address rate case expenses and any concerns. Some of the questions that I had about that very specific entry, it just sounds like Mr. Racher hasn't been involved in that kind of discussion at the company, or didn't have a lot of familiarity with that issue. I'm wondering if Your Honor may permit a very limited and brief written discovery question, just to try to understand what that is, and then allow that into the record upon its being provided by the company.
I was actually inclined to do that myself. So if OPC would like to do the bench data request, and I'd ask that that be answered no later than September 24th, and share that response with the parties. And if it's appropriate, we can have it admitted once the post hearing.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd be happy to take a stab at that. I will copy Your Honor when I propound the request of the company and of course all the parties, but I will also add Your Honor to that so you can see the question that I asked. So to the extent that Your Honor has some question that I didn't capture, you'll know in advance before you receive the response.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, the company has no objection and would be happy to receive the data request and respond within the time frame that you've suggested, September 24.
Thank you. Is there anything else from staff?
Yes, Your Honor. Staff would like to submit, really it's for convenience, updated exhibits consistent with the hearing today. And if you wish, also an updated comparison of the parties' positions.
Yes, I was actually about to ask you about that. I think we discussed that at the last hearing for an updated comparison chart. I would appreciate if we could have that circulated.
Thank you, Your Honor. And maybe file the exhibits.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And I have initial briefs would be due October the 4th. Any of the outstanding updated exhibits and responses to the discovery request from OPC we can address as far as the admission into the record, I believe without a formal hearing unless there's any objection.
No objection, Your Honor. We're happy to try to do that by an email if that would be appropriate.
No objection from staff, Your Honor.
And is OPC in agreement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other issues that we have to address? And just Ms. Garofalo, do you have any time frame as to when that updated comparison chart will be submitted?
Today, we don't think we can have it tomorrow, but we can have it to you Thursday.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. If there's nothing else, then we can conclude today's hearings. Thank you for everybody for patience and technology. And we can go off the record. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We're off the record, Your Honor, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug. Thank you all.
Thank you.